Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Weekly Crop, and this week it's not the size that matters, it's what you do with it. And oh my, we are talking about some lights that pack a punch like you've never seen. Now you may have seen these lights, the Forza lights from Nanlite. They're brand new, but they've been out long enough to get in the hands of some really cool people that have done some great reviews. And I'm not saying don't look at those reviews because they're great, you should watch them. But if you don't have time to watch a bunch of different reviews, we're going to cover the whole Forza family, and I'm going to tell you about all the high points about all those videos do, so that you get a really good sense of what these lights can do. And I got to tell you guys, in the 4 years that I've been doing reviews here at Vistek, there's not a single lighting product that has gotten me as excited as the Forza lineup. They are really truly revolutionary, and the build quality is incredible. So without further ado, let's get into it. There are two things that I want to accomplish in this video today. One being that I want to introduce you to the full line of Forza lights from Nanlite, and there are 3 different products in that mix. And then I want to talk about application. I want to talk about lighting design and where that's going to kind of fit into your production and sort of what type of person these lights are ideal for. So before we do that, I want to introduce you again to the full line of lights. Okay, so we're going to start small and then work our way up, beginning with the Forza 60. It is a 60-watt fixture, as the name would suggest, and that's equivalent to about a 500 to a 1,000-watt tungsten source, like a Unero Redhead, for example. Now, of course, this all depends on the light modifier that you use, and you'll get different outputs based on that. But with this guy, you have a lot of power in a very little body. Unlike pretty much anything I've seen on the market previously, there are some very comparables, but when you look at some other popular ones that we used to use in this size, like the Filex lights or the Hive lights, this gives you a ton more light power than those do. So much so that this comes with a 3-light kit, and that 3-light kit has a couple modifiers with it. You've got some dishes, you've got a Fresnel in there, but you can also get an additional soft box with it. And it has sort of a mini Bowens mount. It is a Bowens mount in the sense of its shape, but it's a lot smaller, fitting more appropriately sized modifiers. And I would encourage you to use this kit in a couple of ways. One is as a handy little interview kit. I've never seen a kit with this small of light that actually can really shoot sort of a talking head interview, somewhere around like a mid shot or mid close-up, for example, quite well. If you place that softbox within about 1.5 meters to 2 meters away from your subject at 100 ISO, you're going to still get a reading of about f4, which is remarkable because very few people ever shoot at 100 ISO anymore. So that shows you the amount of power that you can get from this, especially if you're going to shoot at like 400, 800 ISO. You've got a lot of depth of field there to make sure that your subject is really well in focus, and it's still a nice soft wrapping light. And then you can use those other 2 lights as a background light or a hair light. Additionally, the 3-light kit is a great add-on for cinematographers or videographers looking to add a lot of flavor to their background with a low power draw. All right, now moving up the power ladder, we have the Forza 300 and 500. Now, the 3 and the 500 share an identical design pretty much, so we're not going to cover design twice, but what we're going to do is we're going to use the 300 as a way to talk about all the different design and features of the lights, and then when we get to the 500, that's where I want to talk about who these lights are for and where they're going to fit into your production, whether you're a videographer, cinematographer, or photographer. And starting off, we have with both lights a Bowens mount standard, just similar to the Aperture 300D. And with the Bowens mount, because it's sort of a very widely used mount, you can adapt it to any sort of softbox or dish that you want, which is really cool. But I do encourage you to use the dish that comes with the light, because Nanlite has done a really great job of designing and engineering the facets that these little dipples inside here to be optimized for where the chip is placed in reference to this. Now, when you use dishes, for example, that are on HMI lights or on flash strobes, for example, their approximation in terms of where these facets are. And so the light output with them is enhanced, but not as best as it could be, because some of those lights as well can kind of move forward and back. So they just have to approximate them. But these specifically are designed exactly for where this COB chip is, and that's going to give you the most amount of light output. When tested, we can see that this light is actually brighter with dish-to-dish comparison to the Aperture 300D Mark II, which is really exciting. In addition to that, Nanlite does give you some modifier choices. They have soft boxes available for this, as well as a Fresnel attachment. Moving on to the body of the fixture itself, there's really not a lot to it. You have the COB chip up front, and then all this stuff in the back is really just a fan. It's there to dissipate the heat. Because these COB chips create a lot of light, they also create a lot of heat. So you want to avoid putting any gels super close to this because you're going to melt those gels. And even when you've got this bone mounts attached, when you're putting a gel on, you want to make sure that you're bowing it out a little bit so that air can travel through. Over time, if you overheat the COB chip, it tends to skew a bit green after a couple hours. So really, you want to try to be keeping this COB chip as cool as possible. But you can totally put a gel on there, no problem. Just make sure that there's airflow. This fan does an amazing job of keeping the light cool. And don't worry about the sound too much. Obviously, if you want an ultimate quiet environment, the sound recorders may pick up a little bit of it. Now, if you don't want to have that fan running, the light does operate at 50% with the fan off. So that only means that you're going to lose one stop of light. That's it, just one stop, and you can have the light running without a fan. So that's a great opportunity there. On the light, there's nothing more than just a connection point here, and that's your head cable that's going to go from your controller to the lamp head itself. The positioning of the light is done by the two swivel brackets on either side of the yoke, and that really ensures that any large modifier that you put onto it, like a softbox for example, or a large octabox, is going to be secure and is not going to cause the light to slip. For example, the Aperture 300D Mark I, which of course they've fixed in the Mark II, had a bit of a loosey-goosey attachment on it, which means if you put large softboxes in, the light tended to dip quite a bit. And so with this, you're assured that the light is not going to change with the nice and strong yoke tighteners. Let's talk about the controller now. So here's the controller for the 300 and the power unit. Now you can see that they're two pieces, but the good news is that you can put them together and make them one and just always carry it around as one. And the reason that is designed that way is because the light both operates on AC house power, or it can operate on 2 brick batteries for full DC power. Now, if you're going to operate on brick batteries, there's a couple things that you need to know. For the 300, you need to use a minimum of a 14.8 volt battery, so 14 and up, and that will give you approximately a little over an hour runtime at full power, which is pretty incredible. If you're going to the 500, you're going to need a minimum of a 26 volt battery, and that will give you just under 1 hour of runtime at full power. Now with the AC power adapter on, we have just this simple twist lock here that goes in, and then all we have is just our one head cable that attaches and our power that attaches to the power brick here. And we're ready to go. What I really love about this design is that you can place it flat on the ground like an HMI or fluorescent ballast, and you can even flip the screen over so that it can be read in this way. Now, if you don't want to do that, you can hang it onto your stand by a very simple stand adapter that just slides right on. Now going through the functionality of the device, we have our dimmer control as you would expect to have. Then we have a whole host of effects, flash 1, flash 2, and flash 3. Moving over to storm, we have 3 different types of lightning effects. Then we have your TV effect, and then finally bad bulb, which emulates a sort of bad fluorescent bulb that is sort of dying and starting to flicker. Going into the menu settings, here we have our rotate screen, as I mentioned earlier. We have our address and DMX, and this is really exciting because just like the Forza 60, you can operate all of these lights remotely with wireless Wi-Fi or with DMX. Now, if you're going to choose the Wi-Fi solution, you've got 2 choices. One is that you can get a Wi-Fi transmitter box from Ledgo or Nanlite because they're effectively the same company, and so either will work, and that will send out a Wi-Fi signal that will interface between your mobile app and all the different lights. So you just set each light on their own unique channel, and you can operate it very simply and easily with the app. The connection is immediate and super plug and play. Now, if you don't want to use your app, then Nanlite has created a wireless controller that you can buy separately, and that allows you to control a multiple amount of lights on multiple channels, and it operates very reliably at about 30 meters away and somewhat reliably about 50 meters away. So a very, very cool source that gives you the opportunity to set your lights and then operate them all in terms of their intensity from a remote location. So very, very cool. And then for those running professional boards like Luminaire, there is a full DMX with both the 300 and the 500. Okay, so moving on to the 500, all we can see is that it's visually slightly larger than the 300. The chip on board is the same size. So is the fan size. They're the same. The only difference is the body. I don't know if that's visually just so that you can tell that it's the 500 versus the 3, or whether the larger body size is needed to dissipate heat better, because this is going to make a lot more heat than the 300 is going to. But either way, that's really physically the only difference that we see here. Now, the 500 is really where I want to take the opportunity to talk about the power of these lights. When it comes to the 5 versus the 3, I did a ton of photometrics testing with these, and I can tell you that the 300 is fairly consistently one stop under the 500. So the 500 is existing to give you one stop more brightness. So any meter readings and anything that I tell you about the 500, you can adapt that to the 3 just by taking away one stop of light. The best way to talk about the Forza lights is to equate them to another light source used ubiquitously within the film business. And these are HMIs, or metal halide lights. Now, they are used every day in film business because they are daylight balanced sources running from 200 to 18,000 watts, and they give a very, very high quality light that emulates the sun to a very large degree. And so you can actually compete with the sun with a large amount of these lights. And that's where this guy lives in that realm. It's obviously not going to compete with an 18,000 watt HMI. We don't have that kind of technology yet. But in terms of that smaller scale HMI, we now have something that competes very, very well with it. And so what I want to do is just take you through the different features of these two lights, both this LED Forza light and an HMI, and you can decide for yourself where you are better put, whether you should be sticking with HMI or whether the Forza is the right product for you. Now, in terms of light output, we can't equate the two exactly because it depends on the modifier each light has, but we can get some approximations. And generally speaking, the Forza 500 will reliably get you a light source that's very close to an 800 watt HMI. So this is an M8 from ARRI or a Joker 800, for example. And when we look at that in sort of their wide beam or open face mode, the Forza is actually stronger than a Joker 800, and it's very close to an M8. So we're living in that realm. It's only when you spot out the HMIs that they begin to be more powerful than the Forza. So if you're using a Fresnel or anything like that, the HMI is still going to give you a more powerful beam, but only by one stop generally. So you're only gaining one stop by going with the HMI. Whereas if you're using a softbox or a globe or a pancake chimera or something like that, then the light power will be equal. Now, in terms of its color rendering, we can talk about CRI, which is the color rendering index, and both lights are going to be in the high 90s. The Forza is listed as a CRI of 98. However, there's a new standard called TM3015, which also talks about the quality of the saturation. And when we look at that, the quality of the saturation on HMI is going to be slightly better. But this is something that's really exciting about LED technology, is that with HMIs, when you start to dim HMIs, you really start to lose color fidelity, and it becomes even apparent to the eye. Whereas with LED lights, no matter where you are in that dimming curve, the light quality stays exactly the same. Another great feature to talk about are the special effects. With LED, you can do a whole host of different special effects as you can with the Forza, as we discussed. With HMI, you simply cannot do that. Because it's a gas lamp, you can't just simply flick it on and off, and you can't do these special effects with it. So special effects are really something you can only do with LED lights. Okay, so let's talk about beam shape and quality with the two lights. Now, when it comes to LED and the Forzas here, you can get a nice hard beam out of them, especially if you're going to use the Fresnel attachment or the beauty dish. But the HMI is always going to be a harder source because we have this little COB chip here that's this size, and even with the Fresnel we can increase its sort of surface area. But with an HMI, you generally have a much larger source size beam, and that beam is generated by a glass bulb. And so as a result of that, you're going to get a much finer and a much harder beam that replicates sunlight. So if it's really about the fine details of what you're doing, then maybe the HMI gives you a better source in terms of its cutability and its shapeability. But for most productions, I think you could get away with the hardness that's offered with the LED, and most people likely wouldn't notice the difference. Cinematographers and gaffers would definitely notice the difference, but most other people know. So let's talk about power sources with the two lights. Now with the 500, if we're comparing it to, say, a Joker 800 or an M8, for example, you can safely plug one M8 or one Joker into a 15 amp circuit here in North America. You can try to put two in there, but that's getting a bit dodgy, but you can safely plug 3 of these guys into one circuit, which is great, and that's why that 500 power draw is really awesome. The additional thing that's probably the most compelling reason to get this light is because it operates, as I mentioned, on battery power. If you want an HMI to shoot in the field, for example, you're in a forest or you're on a farm, anywhere where you do not have AC power, that means you're going to have to drag in a very loud and heavy generator to operate your HMI lights. But with just 2 brick batteries, maybe you're going to need several to go over the course of a production, but you can operate these lights on full battery power in the middle of nowhere. Now, in terms of noise and heat, this is something that we did cover before, but I just want to quickly go over it again in terms of the comparativeness to the HMIs. Now, as I mentioned, the Forzas have a fan. The fan isn't terribly loud, but it does create some small amount of noise. HMIs don't really create a lot of noise, especially in the lower wattages, but in the higher wattages from sort of 800 and up, 12 to 1800 and up, sometimes, especially when you're striking them, they can create a bit of a buzzing sound. If ballasts are getting a bit old, if lamps are getting a bit old, they can create a bit of a buzzing sound. Generally though, these are so far offset that you don't even really notice them that much, so it's often not much of an issue. It's likely that these guys would make more sound than an HMI, but again, the sound that comes out of these is so small and so minute that it's not really going to be an issue for any production, to be perfectly honest. But the advantage, of course, with this, with both the 300 and the 500, is that if the noise is an issue, you just simply lose 1 stop of light if you turn the fan off, and then you have a noiseless light. So a really great choice and a really great option for these lights if it was critical. Now, when we talk about weight and portability, it really depends on what HMI we're comparing it to. But for example, we take the K5600 Joker 800. The lamp head fixture itself is relatively the same size and weight, and then the ballast, same size and weight. One of the things that you don't have to worry about with this is that oftentimes people can very easily break the HMI bulbs, and the bulbs have to be handled with a glove so you don't get any of your skin oil on them. So that makes manipulating and just setting and using these a little bit easier, less to worry about necessarily, as well as the Jokers typically come in a big hard shell case that's quite heavy, like a flight case. This comes in a really, really nice soft shell case that does have some nice hard sides to it, so really, really well protects this, but it's lighter to kind of move around. That being said, overall, HMIs are generally much more durable. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, if you've ever been on a film set, you know on the 12th hour when the crew is wrapping out and they're putting all the lights back into the package truck, that they're not gentle with these lights. You know, they're passing, they're throwing them in, they're you know, kind of being kind of rough with them because they know the lights can handle it, and they're moving quick because they want to move quick and they want to go home because they're tired. And my only concern with a light like this is that if you were a gaffer, for example, that wanted to buy a bunch of these for your truck to rent, that you'd have to be a little bit more careful, not so much with the lamp head itself, but the ballast design, and maybe some of these things would wear out or would break a lot easier than an HMI. One of the things that I really like about HMIs is that even though they're big and heavy and ballasts are heavy and head cables are heavy, that they are a lot more durable and that you can't lose a big head cable. It's like pretty obvious that it's there or it's not there. With smaller or tinier head cables, they can definitely kind of go missing or you can't find them. So depending on the scale of your production, I don't know that the Forzas would be a perfect thing for you, depending on how you manage your package truck. But if you are a cinematographer or a videographer or a photographer that wants to have your own lights and doesn't want to have to keep renting HMIs, this is a great thing for your personal kit if you're individually watching over it and manipulating it yourself. I think this is, finally we have a solution that doesn't cost us a lot of money, that gives us the same output as an HMI. So they are incredibly robust. I'm not gonna downplay how strong these lights are, but they don't have the same robustness as a M8 from RE, for example, or a Joker and that type of thing. So just keep that in mind depending on who's buying this light and how it's going to be used. So finally, and very importantly, is this whole notion of price. And this is where LED technology is so incredibly exciting. And I wanted to just show you what the price of these Forzas are compared to other very popular units on the market. So starting at the highest level where we just finished talking, the Forza 500 comes in at only $2,600 Canadian. If we're looking at something that has equal firepower and we're looking at that Joker 800 or the RE M8, the Joker 800 with everything is just under $10,000 Canadian, while the RE M8 comes in just over $10,000 Canadian. So you are saving a heck of a lot of money when you go with the 500. Of course, only if it's right for your production. Now, if you don't need all the firepower of the 500 and you can do with a sort of one-stop difference, so something comparable to, say, a Joker 400, well, then the 300 will save you little over $1,000 at $1,400 Canadian. Now moving down to the Forza 60, we get some equally exciting price comparisons. A single Forza 60 will only run you $400 Canadian, whereas the Felix P360, which is a whole lot less bright, is $1,300. Now, for those interested in the 3-light kit of the Forza 60s, you can get everything in that kit with the 3 lights, including the travel carry case with it as well, for only $1,649 Canadian, which is incredible. And this is really across the board with the whole Forza line in terms of the price for power. It's a very exciting time that we haven't really seen yet in LED technology to get this much power for this little price. And so this really opens up a lot of doors for all types of creatives, not just high-level industry professionals. Now, when I talked about who these lights are for, I did mention a little bit of that in the HMI comparison, but this is not just the realm of cinematographers and videographers. This is a really helpful tool for photographers as well, especially if you're, say, like a daylight or like a natural light photographer. You're used to sort of WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. You can place your model, get the light on them in the way you want, and you're kind of done. But strobes might intimidate you because it's like one flash it goes off, and then you got to figure out, did I do that right? And the learning curve is quite long. But with a continuous light source, it then gets you back to that WYSIWYG idea that you put the light on, you can shape it in the way you want, and you can learn a lot better and a lot quicker. So it's a really handy tool for those photographers, as well as for photographers who are dealing with sensitive subjects like animals or children that might get spooked by the flash, or anybody that might get distracted by it. Having a continuous light source just kind of takes that distraction away. So it's a really handy tool for photographers as well. All in all, I think these lights are really, really exciting. I'm excited to use them a ton in my own personal productions, and hopefully we'll get some chance to use them on some of those things and kind of show you what they can do in those situations. But for now, that is all for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, go out there, have some fun, light some stuff up. See you around. I know, I changed the ending.